Got the switch on? So I have this fairing from a 1987 Yamaha TW200, which is an odd little duck if you haven't seen one. It's the big wheel bike. And the fairing has some damage. A part of this tab is broken off right here. You see it's supposed to look like this. And then it also has a crack here. You can see that. So this is an actual mounting, so we kind of need that part. And you can see that somebody's drilled a hole in here to put baling wire through it, but I'd like to make a little bit better repair on it. So I have these very thin washer things. I'm not even sure where they came from. I have a bunch of them. And I believe they're a stainless steel. They're slightly magnetic, but not very much. So what I've done is taken another one of these, and I've started to make a backbone chase, shall we say? Just kind of shaping it to fit in the existing one. And then what I can do is take it over here and use it to line up the other one. Pretty much using this line of the fairing as a guide. So they will pretty much match. And I don't expect they're going to be perfect, but that's the point, is to just make a functional repair that from, you know, a foot away or so looks like you won't even notice it. Alright, so I've got my little piece cut out here, and it's pretty good. It doesn't need to be perfect. It's just to provide a little bit of mechanical bond between the plastics, the epoxy and the plastics. Now I've been kind of going back and forth how I should attach this while I put the plastic on, that I'll show you in a minute. And I think I'm going to use my old trick of heat to bond these two together. And I did a little test, and it seems to work. So what I need to do is just figure out a way to clamp this on so that it'll stay in position while I do that. And I could just super glue this, but then it's going to be raised above the surface that I'm trying to fill. And I don't think the super glue, I don't think a chemical bond is going to be as good as an actual mechanical bond in this case. So I'm going to sand this a little bit, and then we'll put some heat on there and see what we can do. I'm just kind of looking down the other one to see if it's lined up. Of course, this doesn't have to be absolute dead nuts on. I want to make sure that there's plenty of gap between the edge of the metal and the plastic so that I can fill that with my goop. And I'm just going to use an old Weller soldering iron to heat this up, and let's see how this goes. What I'm trying to do is melt the plastic and underneath and push the metal into the plastic. And I don't know if you can see that, but yeah, I think you can. It's bubbling up. Oop, too much, too much. Go slow. That corner in. It's kind of hard to do this with the camera in my way. And as the plastic comes around metal, it should hold it in there. Let me let that cool off for just a second, and I should actually be able, yeah, I should be able to take the hemostats off. And see, that's now melted in there a little bit. So let me see if I can do some more on this edge. And actually the weight of this old soldering iron is enough to just push that metal down in. And you can tell when the light goes off, that's I'm actually turning it off and just leaving the iron sitting on it, just to kind of hold it down. We got her in there. Let's do this side. Alright, now that piece is, it'd be difficult to get it out of that plastic as it is. And you see it's just a little bit, maybe a little bit below the surface of the original plastic, so we'll have a little bit there to build on. Just kind of flexing the edges to see if the metal will flex out of there, and it's not. So we're going to build up all over this. So it's not a problem. So I'm going to let this cool down completely before I start messing with it again. I sanded this down, and probably got ahead of myself here. I probably should have sanded the metal piece before I put it on here, but it just make it easier. It doesn't make any difference, but it just make it easier. The sanding is just surface prepped for the plastic epoxy. Now, about the plastic epoxy, I have not used this stuff before. I have used the JB Weld, one of the JB Welds, to do a plastic repair before, but it wasn't like this where I was building a piece of plastic. It was just like a crack like this where I just filled it in, and that worked great. It still works today. It's probably 10 years old now. This stuff has mixed reviews, which is Plasticweld Putty. It has mixed reviews, and I think I understand why it has mixed reviews. I think that it's more of a, I don't want to say it's operator error, because I don't think JB Weld does has good enough instructions to always get a good mix with this stuff. I did some experimenting beforehand, and really what it needs is that you need to mix this stuff until it's basically so sticky you can't get it off your hands. If you don't do that, you end up with it never cures, basically. So you got to do a little bit of, I think you got to do a little bit of prep first and make sure you're ready to go. So I have an old pair of calipers that are the correct dimensions, basically, and we're gonna get close to this. It's going into a rubber grommet, so it's not imperative that it's exactly the same, thickness. I've got a center punch that is the proper diameter for the hole, so I can test that out. I expect to get close to that diameter, but I expect I'll have to do some sanding after it's cured. I've got a block here that's going to sit and help me push down the plastic where it is flat. Notice this side is flat. This side sort of has a curve on it. I'll have to kind of do that curve by hand, and I'll try to do that curve. I'm gonna try to get close to this. It's not gonna be perfect, obviously, but water I think is something that JB Weld does not mention in their instructions. But to work this stuff, you really need to keep your hands wet when you're working it, and that allows you to kind of form it while it's setting. But before you do that, I'm going to go wash my hands really well, and then we're going to mix this stuff. And like I said, I'm going to mix it until it's literally sticking to my hands, to the point where it's aggravatingly sticking to my hands. Okay, now I'm going to try to do this live on camera. Most people who work with this stuff just show you the end results, but I think it'd be more instructional if it's done live on camera. So my hands are dry, clean. Get some of this stuff out, and I'm going to use more than I think I need. That's another thing. I would definitely use more than you think you're going to need, because I don't think that this stuff is I don't think if you cut off a little section of it you get the full mix. That's just been my experience. I don't know that for sure, but it just kind of seems that way. This back in, get it out of my way, and then just start folding this stuff. You see it's kind of gray and white, and I just squeeze it, fold it over, squeeze it, fold it over, and like I said, keep doing this more than you think. They say in the instructions to mix it till it's all the same color. That's kind of hard to tell when it's white and gray what's all the same color. I'm just folding, squeezing, folding, squeezing, and it's just starting to get to where I can't pull my fingers out of it. It definitely changes consistency, I can tell you that. See, I'm still fairly clean there. In just a second, it's going to change consistency till it's really pulling off. Doesn't want to pull off my fingers. Right there. Go a little farther. It's like that. That to me says it's starting to set. If you're not getting that, I would not try it. I would just keep mixing. And once you get that, you can start rolling it up. Fold it over again, roll it up. Rolling it kind of keeps it off your fingers too much. And again, I'm not an expert on this stuff. I just experimented with it a little bit to see what works best. And you see, it wants to stick to your fingers. It doesn't want to come off. Now, get my fingers wet, and then I can kind of clean them off a little bit before I start trying to put it on. I don't think you can do this with gloves. The gloves would just stick to everything and it would just be more of a hassle. So throughout the rest of this process, I'm going to keep my fingers wet. And I'm just going to start forming it on, forming it over. Not worrying if there's too much. See what the outside looks like. Way too much on there. I'm going to have to leave a little bit of overhang here for overhang onto the existing plastic, just to make sure I have enough there. And you can kind of see as you wet it, you can kind of shape it a little bit. And I really would prefer not to have to sand in the center, so that's why I kind of keep going back on the thing there. And let's kind of scrape some of this excess off. Obviously I'm going to repaint this, but I don't need this old stuff on there. I do want to overlap the plastic here for sure. I'm sure this is riveting television, but or riveting video, but I just thought I'd show you the whole thing, because you know, it's a messy process, and sometimes people get nervous about messy processes and don't think they can do it, but if you just take your time, keep working at it. I don't like this little seam right here, or that piece of red. Now, I will say you don't want to overdo it. I mean, you don't want to keep going here for an hour, but I think I've gone about 10 minutes. It's setting. I can feel it setting, but it's still pretty flexible. I think we got a little bit fat on the outside, but that's okay because you know, it's just a little bit more meat out there. I want to make sure that this gap is pretty close to this gap so that we don't have any problems pushing it in. And I'll do that with this old pair of calipers that yeah, we're pretty thick there, but I think that's alright. Let's see about this other gap. We could actually close that up a little bit. It says in the instructions that the 20 to 25 minute work life, functional cure after 2 to 3 hours. By functional cure, that doesn't mean necessarily you can use it. It's still a little tacky. But if you got your mix right, by that time it should be pretty set up. But really, I think the curing time should be more like 10 hours. It's a little thick here, but that's okay. I can sand that down a little bit. I do want to definitely sand down the inside to make it kind of square like this is. I'm going to leave it there and come back and look at it later. Oh, one more thing before I do that. If you live in a humid environment, I would recommend you take this in the house. It seems to do a lot better in a dry environment. It's been about 3 hours, and it is hard. The part that's sticking out is still a little flexible, but I can feel that it's hardening up. I don't want to mess with it too much. The rest of it is pretty hard. Still kind of stick a pick in it, but you can feel that it's hardening up. So that's going well. But what I want to move on to now is this other crack. Now this should be a much simpler repair because it's just flat and no issues. I'm going to kind of do the same thing I did with the other thing, and I'm going to take a little piece of that metal and I'm going to put a little stitch across here basically. It'll span the crack, I'll melt it in the same way and cover it the same way. On the outside, and you can tell that this was actually hand brushed by somebody in the past. On the outside, I'm going to try to sand off as much of this as I can, and I'm going to take my razor knife and I'm just going to run it down the groove to create a little bit of gap for the putty to stick into, and then I'll smooth that over. So alright, I just put a hole on the end of that just to terminate that crack. because it doesn't go all the way through, it's just right there. I also opened up the crack on the outside a little bit so I'd have some room for some putty. I need to go a little farther, and I need to be careful with the other side, because I still don't think it's completely cured. But all I'm doing to open that up is just kind of running a knife in it, peeling back a little bit of an angle. It's kind of like a weld prep, just to get a little bit of that, so that putty will get down in there, so it has something to adhere to. I've been using this sander because of the paint that's on there. If they just left it alone, they'd been a lot better off. But anyway, it is what it is. We get a little paint thinner here. We might be able to remove some more of this paint that's not quite coming up. Now the problem with paint thinner is that it does have a little bit of oil in it, so you need to wipe it down with actually that's working really well. Need more of that. You need to wipe it down afterwards, because most of the paint thinners that I've seen lately, this odorless mineral spirits or whatever, they can leave like an oily film, and I have a feeling that would affect your bonding. Oop, I went a little deep. Now, you could just plastic weld this, basically. Just take the iron and put it on there and do that, and that works. But I kind of like the idea of having some metal, especially on the bracket there. But even in this case, I like to have a little bit of metal there, just to take up some of the force. That's a lot better already. Plastic's kind of moving as one piece now, not as two different cracked pieces. And I will go ahead and just very lightly run the iron in there. I don't want to do that on the outside because it just leaves dog crap. We could probably keep going, but I'm gonna leave it there. I'm wiping it down with some alcohol now. This is a functional repair. It is not supposed to look perfect. It's a personal bike, Dad's bike. He just wants a functional repair that's not gonna, you know, break up again. I'll just grab a smear, smear it on. I'm gonna do a little bit light on the outside. Wet fingers. Push it in. And on this side, I can be a lot more fun with it. It's kind of like working with Play-Doh. Alright, here's what it looks like the next day. You can see it's still it's got a little flex in it, but it's no more flex than what the plastic does. Pretty happy with that, actually, if it doesn't break off. This is going to come out pretty well. This is going to look about like it did before, which is, yeah. Anyway, let me try a couple ways to sand it and see what's best. Alright, here's it after sanding, shaping a little bit. It's just a little bit wider than the other one. But we got a flat side on this side, a little bit rounded, kind of shaped it a little bit like the other one is. Best thing I found was file to remove the heavy stuff. I think this is 120 on a power sander, and some 180 to finish it out, some emery cloth. It's not much different than sanding Bondo, actually. Alright, so there it is with primer. Got a little seam right there, I'm not really worried about that. and that hole, which didn't fill. Again, not worried about that either. There's the other side. It's rough as guts, but you know, it'll do. So there we go. Let's go try it on the bike. Perfect.
Find the hole.
Just a little bit wider than the other one.
I don't think anybody noticed that.
But the rubber takes up for the slack. Nice. Much better. So what do you think of your new toy?
I think I can ride it.
Got a fat old rear tire. That tire's as fat as some sport bike tires.